Hi guys, Peter Dingle here with part two, Kids, Guts and All. And this is where we really get into the guts of the matter. Excuse my poor pun there. But what is causing all the problems? What are the issues? And of course, how do we resolve it? What are some of the keys here? Before I go into any detail, it already means you're in our membership program. So please have a look at all of the other gut programs and information we've got there, because it will go into a lot more depth in some areas. For example, I'll talk about dysbiosis in a moment, but we've got a whole hour on that in our other video. So rather than replaying and going into that, also look at our gut health, gut healing one, because that gives you, again, you'll see a little bit of overlap with what I'm talking about here, but it'll go into the in-depth of a lot more areas. So I've got these videos so that you can actually, once you've seen them all, you'll piece the whole picture together. And we're putting more and more up every month. So you will be totally informed more than anyone else out there with lots of great solutions. So welcome to part two. And I just want to reiterate this model because I'm going to be describing parts of it today. You remember I talked about oxidation, inflammation, and metabolic dysfunction as the driving force behind all of the problems. Now, whether it's colic in an infant, whether it's dysbiosis, whether it's constipation in a teenager or an adult, it doesn't matter. It's oxidation, inflammation, metabolic dysfunction. So as a key here, what we want to do is every action we take, everything we do in this program is about lowering oxidation, lowering inflammation, and lowering metabolic syndrome. So you can think about that and you can talk about it with friends and say, okay, so what are some of the anti-inflammatory, the other anti-inflammatory things we can do for your own health as well as everybody else? Because then that takes pressure off your nervous system, your immune system, and your endocrine system. And these are the things that coordinate every single thing in the gut. So if there's no movement happening, it's because there's dysfunction in these different systems in the body, because it's holding on at the sphincter or releasing at the sphincter or something. You know, the nervous system, I'll give you a simple example. If you've got a bacteria overgrowth, a wrong type of bacteria, for example, one you may have heard of, Clostridia, it's linked with diarrhea. It poisons the membrane, the cell walls along the intestines, and so it causes literally diarrhea. So you can see it poisons it. It actually poisons the nervous system. Then the nervous system then says, open up and eliminate it all. So it all works hand in hand with all of these issues. We go back to the basics: inflammation, oxidation, acidosis, or metabolic dysfunction. And what we want to do is improve the functioning of the immune system, which is based around your intestines, your hormones in your endocrine system, and the nervous system. Once we get those functioning, then we get everything back on track. Just to reiterate too, because we're going to be talking a lot about the microbiome, and there's 100 trillion in total. I've never ever seen any figures for infants, obviously divided by 10 or something due to size. But the critical difference here is that what I've described on the right-hand side of the picture there, or 1,000 species and varieties, is that it's very different for infants, and I'll show you that as we go. So what is the problem? Well, we live in the 21st century. As a result, there are constant pressures on there that are causing our digestion to be poisoned, altered, not functioning properly, causing poisoning of our microbiome, our dysbiosis. And so all of these things are happening, and we're exposed to them every day. We no longer live in nature, around the trees, in the bushes, in the caves, on the ground. You know, we're in a sterile environment. We're exposed to toxic chemicals, medicines, antibiotics, and all of these other things, not to mention foods that no longer resemble. This is both for mums, dads, the whole family, and infants. The foods that no longer resemble what we used to eat. In fact, the only food that resembles what we used to eat is at infanthood, and that's human milk, breast milk. So what causes these stresses on our microbiome? Well, the first one is medical dysbiosis. Any operation, and kids go in for operations all the time, and a typical one, adenoids and, things to do with We have kids already at 10 and 12 being operated on and having part of their intestine removed and so on. Obviously, any form of operation is going to involve a lot of medical intervention and therefore a lot of dysbiosis. Antibiotics, without doubt, the single biggest cause of gut problems in our society. And it's not that antibiotics aren't good, they've got a fantastic role in terms of protecting us from life-threatening illnesses, but they're used too frequently. And I've already highlighted the role of them in ear, nose, and throat infections. And we now know that they do more harm up there than good, because where are the ear, nose, throat infections, which, by the way, can be a form of colic too. When I get into that later, I'll explain it. But antibiotics are necessary for the serious ones, not the minor ones, not the things, the fevers. They're viruses. There are other situations out there. Yes, take your doctor's information and use it, but always ask the doctor, is this necessary? Because it will impact on the gut health of your child and everyone in your family. So what we want to do is use them sparingly and where they're needed. This goes for both infants, kids. Infants, we now know, some of the research is the average 2-year-old has 2 to 3 doses of antibiotics in the first 2 years, which is huge. Kids during pregnancy and lactating is also going to affect the microbiome of the mother, and therefore, as you'll see later, the microbiome of the infant being born, the newborns. And of course, medications. And not so much in Australia, but certainly in the US, there is a propensity to put kids who have colic or reflux or problems with their digestive system early in life, even as young as 8 and 10 and 12, on medications for reflux. Now, they cause long-term problems, and these are called the PPIs, proton pump inhibitors. And there's so much research out there saying, even for adults, take them short-term, and for kids, they should not be used. So that's the research, and so I'm just reporting on that. Then you've got chemical dysbiosis. And these are all the chemicals we and our kids and our families are exposed to on a daily basis. As an infant and so on, it's all those chemicals literally on the ground, if we're using pesticides for cockroaches, cleaning agents that always leave a residual on the floors and so on, or the surfaces that the baby's doing, our clothes that are washed in detergents. And everyone hears maybe allergy friendly or whatever else. I'm sorry, folks, they are synthetic chemicals, and they can play havoc with the health, particularly for infants and newborns. But this also goes during pregnancy too. And there's growing research showing that the mother's exposure to toxic chemicals, this may be in the form of even makeup, and hence why I've got other presentations all about toxic chemicals in the home, toxic chemicals in cosmetics and personal care products. So you can go a lot more into depth in that area and understand it. But at this point, without going into science, you have to understand that these are all synthetic chemicals. They're modern day chemicals, and they can play havoc with so many. For example, your endocrine system, which is the coordinating system, your nervous system. They can poison your nervous system, and they can affect your immune system. Hence, these chemicals can start off but not just the dysbiosis, but the whole gut issue problem. So we need to rethink that. Then you've got dietary dysbiosis, and I don't need to go into this one because it's covered in our other sections, and I talk about this repeatedly, ad infinitum, always. What you're seeing in front of you are not foods. They are not foods. If they don't resemble what your great-great-grandparents ate, then they're not foods. They're treats. And the key there, it's the deep fried foods, the sugary foods, but anything that is processed. And you'll understand that later. And when you've seen the other presentations I've done, you'll understand that. We have to get back to basics. You want healthy gut. You see, our digestive system hasn't adapted to the 21st century lifestyle. It's still living 10,000 years ago. It's still 1,000 years ago. It needs the stuff that you had back then, your ancestors had back then. It doesn't mean you can't have the treats, but don't treat kids, infants, young adults. Don't treat them when you're already poisoning, they're already being poisoned by the junk foods, the processed breakfast foods and so on that everyone keeps telling you they're healthy. They're not. And they're not the foods that your great-great-grandparents ate. So your body finds it hard to deal with them, and hence, and you're probably saying, well, why have I got these? Because kids, oh, look, I grew up on cereals and milk, and I know I've got some lasting problems despite what I do for my health, and my health is my biggest focus. I know, but I also grew up with the 3 veg and a 5 veg and 2 fruit and a whole raft of really good foods, and a lot of kids aren't getting that anymore. And on that topic, you've got the misinformation out there, telling people that, these products are good. They rate 4 out of 5 in a government system, or they fit into the food pyramid. The food pyramid is the single biggest cause of health problems in developed countries now. And any intelligent person working in the research in this area tells you, forget it. Take it, absolutely deconstruct it, take that bottom column out and put it somewhere up top. So that's a little hint, get rid of the grains, but also all these other things. If they've got a health rating on them, in most cases, ignore it. Use some common sense and just ask the question, did your great-great-grandparents have it? And a little bit of Milo is not a problem. A little bit of bread's not a problem. But when you put it on top of every single thing, then the treats, you can see where we're going. And I've been looking at some of the diets of young kids in my life, not my family, but I've been looking at those diets and I cringe. I really do cringe, because we're setting them up for long-term disease. Then you've got the toxins added to our food. And the reality is, if it's processed, it's got toxins added to it. It's got preservatives to make it live longer, antioxidants, which, by the way, are the negative ones, and the sulfates, which are linked to asthma in kids. Antimicrobials like nitrates and sulfates are great for preserving food, but also fantastic for poisoning your gut microbes. Yeah. So what we poison out here, if it gets in here, whether we breathe it in or we take it in, it's going to get in there and poison our microbes here, which is what we don't want in a large intestine. Colouring agents, which have been linked to ADHD, which have been linked to a whole raft of kids' issues. What is great there is some of the food companies are actually moving to put vitamins and nutrients and what we'd call polyphenols, plant-based chemicals, replacing some of the colors. And that's fantastic. It's a big move over the last 10 years, some of these companies, so I applaud it, but they're still junk foods. Then you've got your flavor enhancers like MSG, artificial sweeteners. We know, for example, artificial sweeteners are a definite no-no. They poison the gut microbiome and can lead to leaky gut, which I'll talk about in a moment. Emulsifiers were thought to be safe, but the research in the last 7 years is basically saying, look, if it's got emulsifiers in it, definitely don't give it to kids. And mums, that also means for you, because as you'll hear, what you do, the kids, the infants, during pregnancy and breastfeeding happens also. Anti-caking agents, which have aluminium in them. So my message is, if it's got food additives in it, it's got less food and it's not as good for you as it should be. So treat things for treats. The rest are just not foods. Toxic water. It's a big issue, because although there are small amounts of residual toxins in water, it's something I'm constantly telling people to consume lots and lots and more of. And you've got pesticide residues. And about 30 years ago, I did a big project looking at what goes into water and what we know goes into water and who monitors. And effectively, they don't know what pesticides are going into the water, and they don't know what's in the water. So as a result, you've got chlorine and organochlorines. We've got the chlorine from the chlorine added, which is fantastic. It saves waterborne disease. But the last thing you want is these antimicrobial chemicals going into your gut. So if you could take the chlorine out. Here's a little hint, by the way. Chlorine is really easy to get out of water, and these organochlorines, because they're very volatile. They like forming a gas and going up. So if you've got some water you want to drink, put it in a cup and leave it on a sink over a couple of hours, and the chlorine will dissipate. It'll still leave other things in there that are in there, but it'll get rid of the chlorine and lots of those volatile organochlorines, and they'll literally go into the air. Now, on that topic, I should give you a hint. Hot water coming through a bath or so on, you're going to obviously get gases from there. So on my shower at home, we have a chlorine filter. It was not at all expensive. It lasts 6 months and it takes the chlorine out, which is a very, very simple strategy that you can implement. I've also got all my water. I take the aluminium, copper, and lead out. They're in the old pipes and in the joins and the connections and so on. And of course, one of the biggest issues with infants and kids is fluoride. Now, I know infants don't drink water, well, depending on if they're breastfed or so on, but the problem is what mum gets, the baby gets, what goes into formula goes in there. And fluoride is a very, very toxic chemical. It's known to actually destroy the top cells, outer cells in our digestive system. It's also what's called an endocrine disrupting chemical, which affects the hormones, and therefore, you remember that model I had there, the endocrine hormone system, so it can start getting in there, as does aluminium, copper, and lead, and these other organochlorines. So my message is you try to get cleaner, better, safer water. We use a water filter. You can see that picture there. I'll plug that at the end a little bit, but it is just essential that you clean up the water. We don't get much in it, but we consume it every day, and you need to for a healthy digestive system. So then it takes us on to the microbiome. So they're the things, a summary of the things that can cause the problems. But what is it, and what does it mean, and where does it come from? And and some of this information, while it's very relevant to infants, it also, a lot of it extends to kids and adults too. So the first thing we know now is that your microbiome, the infant's microbiome, actually begins before birth. So we know that we used to think that, you know, the baby was born, their intestines all sterile, and they picked them up from the mum. Well, we now know that they don't. So we know they get, in particular, you'll hear these two, well, one of them bifidobacterium, but we also get staphylococcus and so on, and they've found that in the meconium, what's the first poo of the baby. So the baby comes out, you know, mums, you would know this, and out comes the poo very soon after. And as a result of that, they can take the sample straight away, and they've found there are already bacteria. They've also found it in the amniotic fluid, which is that sac of liquid forming around the fetus at birth, which breaks at birth, and also in various other places. So we now know that the baby is already inoculated with the microbiome before they're even born. So the critical thing here is to understand then, and I'll reiterate this time and time again, what the mother has, the baby gets even during birth, before birth. The microbiome is established in early pregnancy. So if you're having a baby, the first thing you want to do is start working. Mums, what you want to start doing is working on developing your own healthy nutritional program. And what we do know is the negative things that I've already mentioned: nutritional habits, antibiotics, medications, infections, as well as the age of the mum can have an impact on the microbiome at birth. So before the baby's even born, these are the things that impact it. So it's so critical to understand that healthiness. Unfortunately, we know that preterm infants, so babies that are born early, have dysbiosis. Now, dysbiosis, I've already explained, it's a dysfunctioning, it's a microbiome in the large intestine that is out of balance. And it may have the same species, but it's all over this way or all over that way, rather than being healthier. And we know that there are certain pathogens in there. I'll put the names up there. You will probably know the Escherichia coli. That's called E. coli. You've probably heard of that one. The point is that there are more of these, higher level of these noxious, toxic, dysbiotic microbes in the gut of preterms. And they've got less of the bifidobacteria and lactobacillus. Now, the great thing, as I'm going to share with you later, we can do something about that. We can do something about it before. By the way, there's evidence to show that there are many things to do with reducing the risk of preterm, and one of those is the gut health of the mother too. As a little aside there, I haven't got that into a presentation yet, but I've given you a hint what the mother eats and how her health and her health of the gut can have a big impact on whether she's at risk of preterm or not. So coming back to this topic, what happens then is when the baby's born, they've got the starting microbiome, and then the rest for the first year, and then for the first 3 years, the first 1,000 days or so, are critical for the biodiversity and setting up the microbiome and setting up your immune system, remember, in your nervous system connections, and your hormone systems, and all the other functions uh, happen in these first 3 years. Hence why I'm emphasizing this now, the importance of getting it right. And you'll already remember that I said the microbiome, the healthier microbiome as you're older. So, you know, in my age, it's healthy to have a microbiome out here. And as you get a bit older, you keep it there. And when it starts to go in, you start to die. It's linked with living longer. And so we want to get it as far as wide as possible as we can, all right, off the screen there, and get those 1,000 different microorganisms. However, in the first 12 months, it's expected or meant to be narrower. And that narrower is because you're getting one single unique feed, in theory at least. And that one single unique feed is mother's milk, breast milk. And it's that mother's milk which not just feeds it, but inoculates. I'll go into some of this detail in a moment. I've been talking about this for probably over 10 years now, but it's amazing the role mother's milk plays on the gut microbiome, not just the baby, but the gut microbiome. And so in those first 2 years in particular, first year in particular, first 6 months in particular, it's primarily high levels of lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, which again, you've heard many, many times and you hear again. Okay, the problem with infants, if all of a sudden that they've got dysbiosis, so a newborn's got dysbiosis, it means that many of the systems in the body aren't going to be working functionally as much as they could. So you're going to have problems with an increased risk of pathogens, disease, food sensitization, infections, including something called necrotizing enterocolitis, which is literally where the end of the or part of the bowel has to be removed, or the part of the bowel is really just dying. And these can happen because of the dysbiosis, and hence why it's so important to get it right. And of course, what it does is, if you've got dysbiosis, then you don't get your immune system set up like it should be. And of course, don't worry, there is some positive sides on here, but that's what will happen. And that's why we are seeing an increased risk in all those diseases out there. So as a result, dysbiosis can generate a delay in the immune system development, which can lead to autoimmune diseases such as asthma, allergies, rhinitis, and lifelong food sensitizations. And again, these autoimmune issues. Now, on the positive side, and I put this little down here, it seems that while probiotics play a very important role as adults, they're probably not the most important part as adults. But taking probiotics at the right strain at the right time can make a big difference in an infant, because there's not so much in there to competing. It's not set up. It's not established. It's like a new garden, and the things are just starting to grow in it, rather than a rainforest, which is in my gut. So it's all this rainforest is just starting to get established. So if you can actually you've got dysbiosis, there is so much research now on the benefits of the infant probiotics. So it has to be infant probiotics, and you'll see that it's usually the lactobacillus and bifidobacteria strains. There are a few more, but they're the primary ones, and that's what the research has been done on. And it can help re-establish it, because it's just a new garden. And as a result, it goes into a new garden, it can fit in there, it can start growing. As an adult in mine, I can take probiotics till the cows come home, and it's not going to actually take hold. It'll help, it'll benefit, but it takes a lot to be established in an adult gut. So those first 3 years, for 1 year in particular, here is a really simple strategy, and we'll go into that. I'll show you some other information on it. Now, the first question that often comes out of this is, what about human milk versus cow's milk? And I'm going to go into a lot of the issues behind human milk and the benefits, okay? And here is a little summary that just to get you thinking. Human infant brain grows for 3 years, and its main food is supposed to be human milk, okay, or something that resembles it. A calf's brain doesn't grow after birth. A calf is 36 kilograms at birth, and after 6 months, it's 226 kilograms. So it's good for keeping a small brain and good for putting on a lot of weight. That's what cow's milk is for. Now, the unfortunate thing about cow's milk is, and you'll understand why, we have lots of problems with it because it's homogenized and pasteurized. Now, that has some benefits, but in terms of the infants, it's doing damage to the milk. And you'll see this as we go through. But human milk has less protein in it than cow's milk, less saturated fat, and more of the what are called the essential fatty acids. Cow's milk is meant for cows. Human milk is meant for humans. And cow's milk is not a great food for humans at any stage. Now, if it's been fermented into yogurt, then milk can become a healthier food. And there are lots of allergists around the world who will tell kids that if they can't breastfeed, if they can't do, then raw cow's milk or raw goat's milk, or believe it or not, even horse milk and camel milk are even better, but on all occasions, raw. And you'll understand why I talk about raw in a moment. So human milk, it's designed for the infant, but what's really critical is that it's a lot more complex than we originally thought. And the complex nutrition in there helps develop our protection systems in our body and protects our body. And milk provides the newborn with lots of nutrients and lots of bioactive compounds. These aren't just things that are absorbed into the body, but when human milk is taken in by the baby, it actually starts to alter things in the gut for the baby and change it around and so on before it's even digested and absorbed and so on. Now, what we do know is approximately 30% of human milk is designed for the gut microbiome. So about 30% is in the form of what we call prebiotics and chemicals like antibiotics and a chemical called lactoferrin, which I'll talk about a few times. But these prebiotics that are designed for the gut microbiome, not for the infant directly, but for the gut microbiome. And it's really simple. I try to explain to people as an adult or kids, everybody should be modeling this. No, not having breast milk, but they should be looking at it. So does your food feed your gut microbiome? If it's processed, it doesn't. If it's deep fried, it doesn't. If it's got sugar, it doesn't. So we go back to the basics. This is a classic, great example of what food should be for adults across the board. So you look at the principles behind what I'm saying and say, okay, am I doing that as an adult? Are my kids doing it as teenagers or 5-year-olds, as toddlers? Then let's think about it. So what affects the mother's milk quality and so on, and I'll highlight this, is the mother's nutrition. There is nothing that can help in gut problems in kids and microbiome in kids is what the mother is having. So that's the mother during pregnancy and obviously during lactation, breastfeeding, and so on. A new breastfed newborn infant has a prevalence of about 9% of the bifido and lactobacillus. And the bottle-fed ones have a lot less of these. So you can understand that it's starting to move that way instead of balancing it out. So the critical thing here is, again, to understand that this is all designed for the gut. And on top of that, in human milk, there's lots of other products in there, but I am going to talk about the proteins because they have a really important role. And one of those groups of proteins are your nutritional proteins. And if I give you a simple example, when you have a particular protein in there, so as an adult, Mum, you've just eaten a banana, a green banana in particular, even better, and as a result, you get some tryptophan. Tryptophan is converted into one step to serotonin. Now, lots of chemical reactions going on in there, but one step, and then serotonin to melatonin. So as a result, what we've got is serotonin and melatonin coming from tryptophan. And if you're having more tryptophan, then your baby's getting more serotonin and melatonin. Melatonin is the sleep neurotransmitter. Serotonin is the calming, composed, almost happy neurotransmitters. There's a bit of misinformation out there, but it's but it has to come from a protein, amino acid, that's been digested. Now, in an adult gut, our gut can actually digest it a little bit. We still struggle, and as we get older, it gets worse and worse and worse. But as an infant, they won't be able to. So feeding an infant baby's milk or cow's milk that's been sterilized, so it's been homogenized and pasteurized, means that they're not going to be able to break it down. They don't have the enzymes you'll see in a moment that I'm going to talk about. And so in the mother's milk, a lot of the proteins are already pre-digested. And this pre-digestion concept is really important, because if it's not digested, the baby really struggles to digest it. You end up with a hell of a lot of gut issues in the stomach, in the small intestine, and in the large intestine. So digestion is essential. Understand that. And I'm going to reiterate that in different ways. So some of these proteins, by the way, milk proteins, they have biologic functions, antimicrobial, immunological, and digestion. And the critical line here is the neonates, so the newborns, have relatively low levels of these digestive enzymes, digestive capacity. Now, in our stomach, in our mouth, I should say, as soon as food goes into our mouth, we release a whole group of enzymes, primarily amylase to start to break down the starch, but also other ones to break down all our foods. And then it goes into the stomach, and our stomach releases the ones more to do with breaking down of proteins and a little bit to do with fat and carbohydrates, but mainly to do with protein, what are called proteases, or protein digesting enzymes. And then it goes into the small intestine, and your pancreas releases more enzymes into there. Now, as an infant, that is not developed in terms of some of these enzymes and so on for a couple of years. So hence, they have to have foods that have the digesting enzymes in them. And so enzymes in mother's milk, they've got amylase. So the firstborn neonate has amylase 1 from their saliva and from the breast milk. So it doesn't appear that they get much in the small intestine. So we need to complement that, and that comes from the breast milk. Around 2 years of age, the pancreas starts to produce amylase. So the pancreas starts to work and produce more enzymes for the small intestinal digestion. So if you understand that, then you realize that having cooked processed meals up until 2 years of age is always going to put a lot of stress on the functioning digestive system and the functioning of every single system in your body. Digestion is a very energy intensive process. You'll know that if you have if you have a big meal, for example, a Christmas meal, and we have them every day now. You have the big Christmas meal, you feel tired, run down, exhausted after it. Even though you've had how many million or zillion calories, you don't have any energy. Why? Because digestion is taking all that. The bigger the meal, the tireder you feel. So what we want to do is supplement, and this goes for adults too. What we want to do is supplement all foods. If it's not raw and if it's not breast milk, then we need to supplement with enzymes. And I'll repeat that again and again and again. In my other presentations, I've talked about it. And for infants and so on, definitely, you'll see a 2-year-old infant or a 1-year-old infant being fed these processed foods. It's great to introduce them to bits of food, but they can't digest them. So what do? They cause gut problems. Now, they may not manifest straight away, but it may be leading to dysbiosis and inflammatory bowel disease, or SIBO, or children's reflux, because it's not digesting it. We have to make digestion, go back to my early little STAR model, we have to make digestion as easy as possible for everybody. Your lipases, which are the ones, these are protein enzymes that digest fats and so on in the saliva and in the breast milk of mothers. So you see, breast milk has all of these enzymes already there, to help the baby, because the baby would struggle. So initially, milk and saliva provides the enzymes, the proteases I've mentioned already. There's another one I mentioned, lactoferrin. Now, lactoferrin is really interesting because it helps. Ferrin, by the way, is a scientific name for iron. So we know that lactoferrin, lacto meaning milk, iron, helps with the digestion of iron in babies. So to get that iron into the babies, it needs to come with the enzymes. And by the way, it has to be at the right pH for it to all work. But that all depends on what's in the mother's milk too. Now lactoferrin plays another role too. It's one of the ones that I mentioned also. It's actually antibacterial against some of the nasty bacteria. And it's been linked with reducing and preventing diarrhea in kids. So it actually has an antibacterial role, a digestion role, and probably lots of other roles that we still don't understand yet. And on top of that, there's so many other enzymes in breast milk. Some trypsin, plasmin, pepsin, which is again to help digest proteins and so on, elastase. But there are still many, many more we don't understand. So trying to mimic that in a formula is impossible. impossible. Because we don't even understand it, what's going on with mother's milk. And so without doubt, the best way to get it is mother's milk. Now, I also want to highlight here too, that to get the probiotics, it's not just the mother's milk that feeds it, but a mother's nipple, and just below the nipple, there's another microbiome. So it's the breast microbiome. Because the breast milk has so many nutrients in it, it's got so many nutrients that feed the gut bacteria, they start to breed in there and on the nipple. So constantly going back to the nipple and feeding off the nipple provides not just the prebiotics, the foods to feed them, but the probiotics that are already growing in there. It's like a yogurt. It's fermenting, the good bacteria fermenting, and the milk when the baby gets it. But also on the outside of the nipple, the bacteria are growing, so they'll pick up some of the bacteria as well. So hence that human contact. Human contact in that first year is critical, not just through the nipple, but everywhere. Whatever the mother has in her and on her, the baby picks up through the cuddles and the closeness and the proximity of the mother-baby relationship. And so having the mother having the right microbiome, again, emphasized all through that time. It's in that first year that it's absolutely critical. Then you've got the milk proteases that I talked about, and these are the ones that break down proteins. Now, I'm putting this up here to emphasize the role of proteins. Now, a lot of people will think proteins muscle. Okay, right? Yeah, fantastic, essential for building muscle. By the way, you're probably not aware that your bone is actually made out of protein and calcium added on the side. Protein is involved in all of your connective tissue, e.g., colostrum. Your digestive tract and all of these parts of your skin and everywhere in there is made out of proteins. And so what you want to do is make sure you've got plenty of these proteins, but probably the most important proteins are the digestive enzymes. But if you're not digesting because you're not getting those protein enzymes in mother's milk, and you're not producing them for the first year or two, then it's going to be hard. It's going to produce a lot of gut problems down the line. Now, if we highlight this, preterm infants have lower gastric protein digestion capacity. So as a preterm, they're producing even less of the enzymes. Hence, it impairs nutrient uptake and it impairs digestion. And as a result, it can lead to long-term problems. Let me give you an example with the tryptophan. If the infant isn't getting tryptophan, they can't produce serotonin. And if they can't produce serotonin, they can't produce melatonin. Melatonin and serotonin aren't just for baby sleep and smiling and being calm, get the idea with colic and things in here, but it's also essential for controlling your nervous system. In adults, and I've never seen figures for infants, but in adults, the adults produce something like 400 times more melatonin in their digestive system than they do in their brain. So if you're thinking melatonin, serotonin, happy brain, sleepy brain, well, guess what? Happier gut and relaxed gut and functioning gut. That's how important it is. So if they're in preterms, and if any infant is going on any processed food where they can't digest the proteins into tryptophan, and later on, I'll have some more on foods that have tryptophan, but you can quickly look some of that information up on Google and so on. Look at the food. So the mother gets it. What the mother gets, the baby gets. What the mother gets, the baby gets. Remember? So if you increase your tryptophan foods, mum, the infant during pregnancy and lactating during breastfeeding is going to get them as well. Now, what we do know is if they're not digested, if these proteins aren't digested in the stomach, because you don't have the digestive enzymes, which is infanthood, then they go through to the small intestine and large intestine and ferment. And I'll give you an example of some of these proteins that may be going through. It's called some of the ones, the ones DERP1, which is the dust mite allergen. You're breathing it in, yeah, it goes into your digestive system. Your stomach will break it down. Yeah. And if it doesn't get broken down, it goes into your large intestine and it goes up. And then through a process called leaky gut that I'm going to show you in a moment, it can set off an immune reaction. The same thing happens with casein in milk. That's the milk protein. The same thing happens with the protein in peanuts. Peanuts don't cause allergies, It's a leaky gut, a dysbiosis that is the trigger to set off the allergies. And literally, it's just the peanut protein, the milk protein, the dust mite protein that actually just happens to be there when the gut is in a sick dysbiosis state. So if you understand that, keeping the gut dramatically reduces your risk of nutrient deficiencies, allergies, and intolerances. And the primary place to start, and people don't get it, is in the stomach, to make sure digestion occurs in the stomach. If proper digestion is occurring in the stomach. Now, here's a hint for adults and kids too, but for infants, this usually isn't an issue. But the bigger the meal, the poorer the digestion for adults. So if you have a big Christmas meal, it just can't break it all down before it has to let it through. It just forces it way out. Well, not really. And so we're getting all these undigested parts going through. And as an adult, I will tell you, I supplement every single one of my dinners. So I'll eat a lot of raw, and at nighttime, and this goes for kids too, remember, what applies to me applies to them. They're just 50 years or more younger than I am. And what's critical with them is that you don't want their digestive system exhausted now. And so critically, I have digestive enzymes with every cooked meal I have. So they're in my pocket if I go out, and at home, I just get them out and have a couple of digestive enzymes. Mums, if you're pregnant or lactating, great for digestive enzymes. Why? Because it improves your digestion, and at the same time means that those things are going to digest and get through to the baby. So mums, I'll reiterate, what you eat and digest, the baby gets. Colic. It's every mum knows what colic is because it's rampant. As I showed you earlier, some of the statistics, maybe as much as 80% of kids will have colic. Now, that may be a couple of outbursts. There is a proper definition for it. And unfortunately, mums, you don't need to know the definition. You know that if your baby's crying, then guess what? It's probably it's colic, and it's probably a functional gastrointestinal disorder. Now, you've got two types of colic. You've got ones which relate to other areas and the other ones which relate to the gut. And the gut probably makes up about 95% of the pains, the aches, the cryings, the dysfunction, and all those other issues from constipation to diarrhea and bloating and all in infants, okay? Now, it's a very common phenomena. And it's a common phenomena because of the circumstances. I've told you, we live in the 21st century and we don't get the breast milk and the mother's not getting the food and all these other stresses on there. And so particularly common, and the vast majority of kids will grow out of it. But you don't want your child in pain. It's clearly pain and distressing. And so one of the easiest, best things you can do is just learn a lot more about it. And I'll be posting up more and more on colic as we go, as I get through all the presentations I need to, and I'll put on just a little blurb, some extra stuff on colic, but I'm going to give you plenty of stuff here right now, okay? So literally there's the baby is going to be in irritable moods no matter what. Perhaps a part of life, or I actually think it's time to start working on it now. Don't wait till the baby is in a huge amount of distress. Now, you've also got the non-gastrointestinal colic, and these make up the smaller batch of these ones, 5% or so, and these are the food feeding techniques and so on, modified child-parent relationships, immaturity of the central nervous system. So you can actually get some physiological dysfunction in infants, but it makes up a relatively small number. And if it persists, without any doubt, with all of this, I tell people, go see your doctor anyway. Go see your midwife. Go see your specialist. Go see anybody who can up this. Unfortunately, most of them won't have this depth of information that you have, but they'll be great in diagnosis and great in pinpointing issues that you may then be able to address. And so back down the bottom there, you can see maternal smoking, maternal drinking, maternal nicotine replacement, but all of these things can play havoc and lead to it. So the mum has to stay as clean and pure as possible. And you'll see this again in a moment. So gastrointestinal colic, what causes it? I'm not going to go through that list, but there's, essentially we don't know. We don't know what causes a lot of these problems in adults, where there's 100 times, 1,000 times more research going on. And we can ask the adults and get some information. What makes it hard with infants is we just don't know. But again, it's what the mother is doing, what the mother's going through, as well as the foods that are going to the baby and the conditions around the baby. And I've given you a lot of things to think about already in terms of what you can do. What causes it, very hard to work out. And as you know, but what's great is that we know that if a child has colic, although most of them will grow out of it, we know that if they have colic, they are at increased risk of what we call functional gut disorders later on in life. So at increased risk of reflux, SIBO, inflammatory bowel disease, constipation, diarrhea, bloating, and all those other conditions I've talked about. So if we can resolve it now, as young as possible, now if you've got a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old, the great thing is you can still do a lot. There's still a lot of flexibility at every age. It's just probably after teenagerhood that it becomes more locked into what's happening. So what we do know with infants with colic, they have dysbiosis, and they have, in particular, two that you're probably aware of: E. coli and Clostridium. These are the two mains. There's three. There's other twists. These are when they've grouped a whole group of studies, and you'll see down the bottom of the page, you're probably saying, what's that finer print down there? Well, these are the studies. Now, where I put these, I can find dozens of them, okay? And everything I'm telling you about, I can support with the studies. And sometimes I just put the studies up to just get it across. We know that colic and dysbiosis go hand in hand. And it's probably, if I make an academic guess, around about 50% of colic is directly linked to dysbiosis in the gut. And so they've got lower levels of lactobacillus and bifido, which I've mentioned in a few times already. So why does this all happen, and what's the problem? Well, what we do know, if you look at that, I'll give you a description here. That little red thing, please excuse my PowerPoint presentation stuff. I'm not very good at designing things, but you can see that pink bit down the bottom looks a little bit of sausage. That's your blood. Directly above there and below the blue bits are the cells, and your immune system is directly, it's just your immune system directly below the cells. Up above those blues, the cells, you can see the little hairy parts. These are called the villi. And amongst those, and in the mucus layer there, is your gut microbiome. Now, whether it's the good ones, the bad ones, or what we call commensal ones, which are just the ones that are there. Sometimes if they're overgrowing, see, there's no problem as an adult to have a little bit of candida or a little bit of helicobacter or a little bit of what other Clostridia, E. coli, staphylococcus. It doesn't matter. What's important is the proportion of the good ones to the bad ones and the balance they have in there. That's the most critical part. And so if we've got that nice balance in the mucus layer, now the mucus layer depends on the health of the cell, and the mucus layer will determine how healthy or what microbes live in there and if they can get through. And the problem is, once you get leaky gut, those gaps between those blue cells there start to open up. And rather than just the really small molecules, for example, like tryptophan that can get through, or serotonin or melatonin, it might be the whole big molecule at the beginning, which then gets through, and then your immune system doesn't know it, it doesn't recognize it, and so it sets off an autoimmune system reaction. Hence why we have an increase in all these allergies. It's that leaky gut, it's that gap between the cell wall, and there's more information on that in some of my other presentations, that we want to keep healthy. So if we can keep our gut microbiome healthy, if we can make sure our infants, our kids, our toddlers, our teenagers have a healthy microbiome, then we can make sure that those big undigested proteins, remember I talked about, don't get through, can't get through, and the bacteria can continue to break them down. Now, the main food of these good bacteria in the gut is something called prebiotics with enormous fibers. So for any infant over 1, we have to make sure that they've got lots of these prebiotics, and I'll mention that, okay? And those prebiotics stimulate the bacteria to chew them, break them down, produce chemicals that feed the gut wall, and the gut wall then produces a healthy mucus layer, which then protects the gut microbes. So in all, it's this system that keeps generating, but it all comes down to fiber. And when it comes to young kids and teenagers, they're not getting enough fiber. There is not enough fiber in their diet. They are fiber deficient. And most of the authorities suggest for a young kid, it might be 12 or 15 grams. They're getting 1 or 2 or 5. Adults, they suggest 25 to 30, male, female, differences, but they're getting 5. There is not enough fiber. And it's not just one like psyllium. Please don't just go out and whack out psyllium. The one I'm constantly talking about is K-fiber, because it's a mix of lots of fibers and other gut foods in there. Now, you'll already know about that because you're on the membership program and you've heard me about it. And it's very cheap and cost effective and great. And we know that it benefits the gut of every child up from 2 up. And why? Because it starts to feed the good bacteria that feed the chemicals into the gut wall, which feeds the gut wall, which then creates the mucus, which then stimulates a nice, healthy environment for the microbes. And if that gap increases, that's when you've got leaky gut. Leaky gut is a real condition. Some of the medical professions say it's the leaky upper epithelial. It's leaky gut, and it's the simplest strategy we know it is. So, how does the maternal diet affect colic? What the mother eats, the baby eats. Now, this happens all the way through, but I'm emphasizing it more and more again. So, what can the mother do? Well, what we do know is if a mother is breastfeeding and the baby's having colic, if the mother has a little bit of a think about what she's eating, not based on what you're told out there in the real world, but what you get from my program, okay? We might find that you can make a big difference. And it may be something as simple as dairy and gluten. Mums, if you eat dairy and gluten, and in particular, if you're not digesting dairy and gluten, because you're not doing what I've said, then the baby is going to get the repercussions of that. By the way, the baby is going to get the repercussions of the inflammation also that's generating in your large intestine as well. So everything passes through. And so what we want to do is make sure mums, you get, a low toxic, a diet that's going to cause very few, if any, problems. And what they've found is when they put mums on when the baby's had colic, what's called a FODMAP diet, and you can see why it's called FODMAP diet. Now, FODMAP is a treatment. It's not a lifestyle, okay? FODMAP is a treatment. So mums, you may want to go on it for a week or two, no longer, because FODMAPs restrict a lot of the fibers. But what it helps you do is it helps you understand what may be causing the problem. So have a look up FODMAP. Remember, it's a treatment short-term only. But when they put mums who had colicky babies on a FODMAP diet, they found the crying duration went from 142 to 52. So the duration and the crying time all dramatically increased. When they compared that to controls, it was about a 50% reduction. Now, we've seen similar results on mums going on a gluten-free diet. And if you do go on a gluten-free diet, you have to understand that gluten is put in everything. It's in everything. Any of the processed food, it will be put in there. Dairy, also read the ingredients, but best to go back to natural. Mum, eat as healthy as you can, and that will give the baby the best option there. By the way, I've mentioned K-fiber. K-fiber mums is a FODMAP-friendly fiber. In other words, it goes through the large intestine and doesn't cause any problems on the way down. So the K-fiber, that's why, again, we've been telling so many people about it. A low allergen maternal diet is another one. And the difficulty is working out what the mum may be allergic to and or the baby is allergic to. And in this case, it's often suck it and see. You'll see the studies I put there, but there are lots and lots of studies on this. And they've found that if they reduce some of the typical things that are causing allergies out there, then in adults, by the way, the food intolerance and allergy list is a lot more out there. But in infants, if you can eliminate some of them for a week or even for a couple of days and see what happens. The digestive process is quick, obviously within 24 hours, and going into the milk and so on is another 24 hours. So do your sums there. When they excluded, typically in elimination diet, they'll exclude cow's milk, eggs, peanuts, tree nuts, soya, and fish from a diet. Now, anything else that the mother may know causes her a gut condition. obviously worthwhile, which may, by the way, be wine and other things. So the research in this one study that I've listed down there, after 7 days, they saw dramatic improvements in the distress, in an elimination diet, a reduction of distress behaviour among breastfed infants and colic presented in the first 6 weeks of life. So when the babies had the colic at 6 weeks, they gave it to them, and there was a dramatic improvement in them. The mother went on this diet, and there was a dramatic improvement in the kids. So it's worthwhile if it's stressing you out a lot. And by the way, I should say, if it's stressing you out a lot, but the baby's crying, then you're producing stress chemicals like cortisol, which will be going through into the breast milk as well. So very important to mums to understand everything you do impacts the baby. Kids' food allergies. So if you know they're now past 1 or 2 or 3 years of age, and we now know that around about 8% of children, 11% of adults, at least in the US, and will be much the same in Australia and other developed countries and so on. And we know that there's a strong link between gut dysbiosis and the development of allergies. And we know that the gut dysbiosis leads to an overreaction of the immune system, and as a result of that, it leads to the allergies as a result of the dysbiosis. The right chemicals like the butyrate and what we call the short chain fatty acids that feed the gut wall and protect your intestines. So fantastic, these short chain fatty acids. They're not being produced, and again, understanding that you're creating more and more problems. And of course, the last line there, the trials have shown as kids, because their gut is still that fertile little, not as fertile as the infant, but still fertile ground, taking probiotics in infanthood can mean a big difference in terms of it re-establishing their gut microbiome for the rest of life. Great situation. Food intolerances. Some of the symptoms in both infants, colic, and children. Unpleasant symptoms: nausea, bloating, abdominal pain, diarrhea. They can be food intolerances, not food allergies. There are food intolerance testing, and I'm doing a bit of background work on that, which we'll be putting up once we've got some more detail. It usually begins an hour to an hour and a half maybe afterwards, and can last up to a day or 2 or 3. The problem is you need to understand and look at what the kids are eating. And the problem is kids will often forget, we often forget what we eat. And so the best way to diagnose something is a food elimination diet again. With kids, if they're showing any signs of gut disturbances, and some of the things you've already done, the probiotics, the fermented foods that I'll briefly mention and stuff later on, aren't working, then it may be worth looking at food intolerances. You can go to a specialist and see if they can come up with something. Otherwise, an elimination diet is by far the easiest, and eliminating some of those things that I've already listed up in the previous slides. So for the infant, see if that works. As we get older, the list goes wider and wider and wider and wider in terms of things that may cause food intolerances. So for kids, it tends to be fairly narrow by comparison. So it can be managed, and it can be benefit, as I've already highlighted, by probiotics. Now, here is some interesting studies, or this is one study, but it highlighted that if you're concerned about your baby, a colicky infant, or even not a colicky infant, but you want to do something positive, the introduction of the right type of probiotics in the first year of life, in the first year of life, can make a big difference. Now, in this study, they had 589 infants, newborners, less than 1 week of age, and they were given a particular bacteria, Lactobacillus reuteri. Now, this is the particular one, the DSM 17938 is the strain. Now, there's a big difference between them all. And so you actually can get supplements with this on. And they gave them a placebo for, in one group, half of them for 90 days, and the other half got the Lactobacillus reuteri DSM. Okay, so 2 comparisons. They looked at it, and at 3 months of age, the mean duration of crying time in the Lactobacillus group was 38 minutes compared to 71 minutes in the one that had the placebo. They didn't get the bacteria, the probiotic. So it almost halved the problem. The mean number of regurgitations was 2.9 versus 4.6, just under half. so you can see the benefit of prophylactic. So if you're concerned, and given that, you know, there's a lot of stress, even in the birthing process or even in the pregnancy process, that we can assume that there are going to be some issues, that it may be worthwhile considering. Now, of course, consult with your practitioners and so on, but the research is there, and this is what the research shows. And these are multiple studies now. The great thing is there's overwhelming research of the benefits of, but it's the particular strains that are critical. So you don't give an adult strain to an infant. You don't give an adult strain is fine for some at 1, 2, and 3, but not in that infanthood in particular. Here's a couple of studies that looked at probiotics and colic, and the first one was a single study, infant supplementation for 28 days, and they looked at the crying time, and it was reduced by 57%. Now, they also looked at something called calprotectin, and this is an indicator of inflammation. So not just did the crying decrease, but also the inflammation. Remember my little triangle? So we're getting somewhere there. Probiotics in 99% of the situations are anti-inflammatory, they're antioxidant, and they help with reorganizing the metabolic dysfunction. Okay. Now here, the second one I put up there is a review where they come together, and there are lots of these in science where they put all the studies together and see what happens. And in this one, 4 double-blind trials, so like the one above, but 4 of them around 21 days, and they gave them Lactobacillus reuteri, the same one, DSM 17938, which is available, and involved 345 infants, and it reduced the colic time by 25.4 minutes. So the message is it does have a benefit, so prophylactically and for crying time. And of course, here are the other studies. I've got them in small print because I can produce another 100 of them or so. And there are so many studies out there highlighting the benefits of specific probiotics in treating colic. Now, in mother's milk, of course, and in formula and the foods we eat as adults, there are something called prebiotics. And these are the foods that feed the gut microbiome, which stimulates the growth of the good ones and the good chemicals like the short chain fatty acids and melatonin and serotonin. And that then helps with all the digestive process. I didn't mention that earlier. When the right microbes of bifidobacteria and lactobacillus ferment fibers, they also produce other chemicals like the neurotransmitters, serotonin and melatonin. So you can see it's a win-win-win situation, giving you the right foods and infants the breast milk and young kids the right foods that have got prebiotics in, then you know they're going to get the right chemicals for the whole digestive process. So, and one of those you might come across is something called galacto-oligosaccharides, or it'll just be called oligosaccharides. And they're a potent stimulator of bifidobacteria, the main one. And so the studies that have been done on infants and children being supplemented with the prebiotics show overwhelmingly benefit in terms of reducing the risk of allergies and asthma. It's a simple no-brainer. And of course, improves the microflora, improves the levels of short-chain fatty acids and the other chemicals that are in the beneficial chemicals in there as well. So these feed the good bacteria, which then feed the gut wall, and these are the prebiotics. And remember, for infants, it's very different to adults. In adults, there are a lot more prebiotics that we can consume that are going to be beneficial for us, okay? In infants, particularly that first year, and then for the next 2 and 3, depending on if there's any breastfeeding going on, then you can introduce a much bigger range of prebiotics to get that bigger diversity as the kids age. They do this in formulas. There's increasing claims and information about prebiotics coming into formula. If you've ever seen a baby, an ad on television for prebiotics, for infant formula, you will often see them, and we've got prebiotics, and we've got added this, and we've got added that. And that's great, because what they're trying to do is mimic human milk as much as they can. And these prebiotics, the ones that they put in there, should be the ones that promote bifidobacteria and lactobacillus, which do the good things, produce the short-chain fatty acids, which, by the way, poisons Clostridia and E. coli and the other ones that we don't want so many of. It's a really nice balance that happens in there if you give them the right food. So formulas, they're trying to duplicate as much as possible what breast milk does. Unfortunately, they don't. They're still nowhere near as close, but they're getting better and better. So if you have to, you can formula feed. If you have to, there are some other things that you can do along the way. One of the other things they do in formula feed, and this is a really good hint for adults as well. In infanthood, as I've already highlighted, it's really hard to digest proteins. Up until probably 2 years of age, you're not going to get complete protein digestion. Therefore, the chemicals are going to get through, the whole proteins are going to get through and cause these leaky gut, allergies, autoimmune conditions, what I've already told you about. So what they're doing now is they're, in some of the formulas, they're fermenting them. They're actually causing them to be metabolically broken down, going through a process called hydrolysis. And it's making them much, much more easily absorbed by the baby. So the message is, if you can get the food that the infant and the baby and even you are eating that's already been pre-digested a little bit, then it's going to take the stress off your digestive system, which is why adults end up with so many gut issues as they get older. Your system is just exhausted and run down. Okay, so if you look at the studies on it, so they're giving in these hydrolyzed proteins. They've gone through a process of hydrolysis, which means partial breakdown. So the amino acids are readily available to the infant's gut and then to be absorbed into the infant. So you can get your tryptophan, you can get your tyrosine, you can get all your other 20 or so essential amino acids in the body of the infant, because you're getting protein digestion, and therefore all your neurotransmitters, your hormones are made out of proteins. All of these things are made out of proteins, but you have to digest them. So in one study where they gave 40 infants with infantile colic, they treated them during a month with partial proteins that have been gone through hydrolysis, reduced lactose, and they had an increase in the growth of bifidobacteria. So they added some probiotics with the hydrolysate. You see how they're getting more and more, the probiotics, the prebiotics, the hydrolysate. That's what we're after. Crying time decrease with 2.7 hours, from 3.2 to 0.5. See, I'll come back to it. In a lot of incidents, the baby just isn't able to digest the food. Nobody even understands this process. Same happens in adults. The baby has to be able to digest it, because it's only when it's digested that the body can use it, but also when the body can recognize and say go through. Otherwise, it sits there, causes problem, causes bloating, causes the wrong type of bacteria to go through as it goes through, and so on. So crying time, we know, stool composition, constipation, diarrhea, all these things start to improve when you get the right digestion going on before the baby gets it. Now, classic example of that is fermentation. As an adult, as teenagers, anything fermented, I've told you, milk is not a great food. Yogurt is. Sorry, good yogurts are good foods, not the ones that have all the colors and the flavors and the additives and things like that. Basic yogurt. If you want it for a kid, then add a little bit of raw honey into it. Not for the infant, by the way, that's for the kids. The toddlers and up, and the ones who are already having solids and main foods and things like that. But the message is yogurt becomes a better food. Still not necessarily fantastic, but it's become alive again because it's got those bacteria in there doing the work, fermenting the food, breaking the proteins down and making it easy to digest. That's why it's going to be so beneficial, not just because it's got the probiotics, but because it's got the proteins in it that have been pre-digested. So this concept of pre-digestion, I keep coming back. Fermented formula, the research shows that when they ferment the formula, they see, again, big differences in the various signs and symptoms of colic. Same thing applies to kids and adults, as I've said. The prevalence of infantile colic in the experimental versus a control group was 1.1 to 8.7, making it easier for them to digest, reduced it by 80% or so. That is huge. And all the studies showing that. So we want to make sure the thing, and that's why it's all trying to mimic human milk as best it can. So let's move on to what else we can do. Well, herbs and essential oils, without any doubt. Now here I'm talking about the mother in particular, but mother as well as infants and children. And always consult someone who knows a lot more about essential oils than I do, and never give any essential oil in food unless you know and working with someone who can help you at a professional level. But there is a huge amount of evidence, herbs for infants and so on, essential oils for toddlers, for infants has shown up repeatedly to be beneficial. And there's a couple that come through repeatedly, and fennel is one of those. And there's a little study I put up here where they had 125 infants, 2 to 4 weeks of age. They gave them fennel seed emulsion. Now you're probably saying fennel seed emulsion. They've used fennel seed oil, they've used fennel seed drops, they've used fennel seed tea, they've used fennel seed. And by the way, I grow fennel in the front garden, and my grandkids are constantly eating fennel because it's a great digestive even for adults as well. So we're eating it as well. So the use of fennel oil emulsion eliminated colic in 65% of the infants. Wow. And in the treatment group compared to 23%. So we saw literally halving of the amount of colic in the group. And what's fantastic here, this term, what's called an absolute risk reduction, there was a 41% absolute risk reduction. So 41% of the people saw a significant, huge, and very large difference. Now, also, there's another number I want to introduce you to quickly called the number needed to treat. The number needed to treat is used for all medicine. Now, if you're taking cholesterol medication as an adult, you need to take 300 people have to take cholesterol medication to stop one heart attack. That's the best studies ever. Some of them say you have to take 1,000 and don't really work, but let's say 300, right? Now here we're talking, that's medicine. Now here we're talking about the use of some herbs and essential oils, and the number needed to treat was 2. In other words, if you treat 2 people, there'll be one of them who benefits from it. So it's such a simple strategy. Look it up. There are lots of products. You can go to your local herb stores or local health food stores and ask them and work with professionals in this area. I'm just the scientist who does all the research and pulls it together and shows you there are studies. In another study where they had 88 infants, 41 in the test group, 47 in the control group, and they found benefits, again, about a 50% benefit when they looked at extract based on, the first one is chamomile. That's a scientific name for chamomile, by the way. Fennel is the second one there, and Melissa officinalis is the lemon balm. So when they used a combination of those, and we had, again, a 50% benefit in them. And for infants, and that can work through the mother, and for the infant and for kids as well. So it can be made into lots of things, as I said. A tea, it can be added to foods, it can be a whole raft of these things can be used when you're really smart at it. Here is another one where they just use chamomile. There's a huge amount of evidence on the benefits of chamomile. As adults, it has a calming effect, kids the same, and if they're stressed and so on, it can be beneficial. There's good evidence for peppermint oil, decreasing duration, frequency, and severity of pain in children and suffering functional gut disorders. And the peppermint oil and or some of these herbs and spices, and again, there's a lot of research on there. That'll be another presentation later on, but simply applied externally in those areas is shown to be of benefit in there. There's also good evidence for the effectiveness. This is one study that brought all of them together and said, okay, what is showing up in them? Let's get to the science of it, not just these wishy-washy claims people make. And the science says, I found that fennel oil preparations, the oil, the tea, the herbal compound, etc., what I've mentioned, in treating children with infantile colic has lots of benefits and no serious adverse effects were reported when they brought together all these dozens and dozens of studies. So there's a starting kit for you in terms of herbs and essential oils, but always consult a professional in this. And remember, you don't take any essential oils in the mouth unless someone, orally that is, unless you're working with someone. Now, I've already talked to you about the benefits of raw. All raw foods, mother's milk's raw, okay? Cow's milk is destroyed because it's homogenized and pasteurized, it's processed and it's heated up. So you destroy all the enzymes that break down the cow's milk. So all raw foods come with their own enzymes to digest themselves. So what you're after is right through. So as soon as you get to the infant stage, through the infant stage, you want to look at raw foods. Not all the time. But as much as you can, because raw foods have the fibers in there, the prebiotic component of it. They have some bacteria. Every food has bacteria in it. What these germaphobes, people worried about germs, don't understand is everything you touch, everything you come in contact with, everything has millions and millions and millions in a single apple, in and on the apple, not just on it, remember, but in it. You've got 100 million microorganisms in there. Now, they're mostly good ones. And when you have that apple, you actually get them and they help rebalance your gut microbiome. So don't start not eating apples, because when you cook foods, you destroy all of those and you no longer get the constant supply of probiotics and prebiotics. And all raw foods come with their own enzymes to digest themselves. Now, the best example there is pawpaw. You all know that pawpaw is a great food. It's a great digestive. It's got excess. Mango, miso soup, anything that's fermented has excess of fermentation enzymes that will help with the breakdown of food. So they help with the digestive process. So they can be given to kids at 1, 2, 3 years of age, to the mother during lactation, to the mother during pregnancy, and so on, to get everything established in here. Whether they're given to the infant at the infant period up to 12 months will depend on a lot of things you'll need to consult. But at the end of the day, it's much better for the baby in terms of digestion than it is for having highly processed foods that are very difficult to digest. Healthy snacks for kids, it's simple. Stop treating them to death. Our kids, our grandkids love these foods. And they never get one thing the same, always a cocktail and a combination. You can see down there on the star plate in the corner, that's an avocado on thinly cut sourdough rye bread, and the avocado has some little bit of salt and some curry powder mixed into it. Lovely mix. The kids love it. I love it. The pizza in the middle there is a vegetarian pizza. A little bit of meat's not a problem, okay? But it's also on a gluten-free base, handmade base. Then you've got the fruits and nuts and seeds and all those in the combinations. And again, healthy foods are simple to digest and don't cause a problem. Lots of snacks, and we've got lots of those snack ideas in our other books and information. Supplements, absolutely critical for mums and kids, without any doubt. Now, I'm skipping the infants. Okay, we've done a lot with infants already, but infants need all these as well, and they will get them through the mum. And if they're not getting it through the mum, then talk with a professional, work out how to get them. However, fiber, probiotics, and symbiotics. My first recommendation is always go for K-fiber. It's the simplest strategy for mums and kids. I made a chocolate smoothie, raw chocolate, by the way, smoothie for my granddaughter this morning. It was a green banana. They've got more fibers in them, more prebiotics in them. A green banana and mixed with some almonds and nuts, linseed. I'm a big fan of linseed in my smoothies. And I'll show you them, a couple of examples of them in a moment. And in it, I put some K-fiber, a spoonful of K-fiber, which has so many beneficial nutrients and prebiotics and other things that feed the gut. And on top of that, I put in a little bit of probiotics as well. So we've got a symbiotic. That was a smoothie that I just made up for my granddaughter. It took me all of 3 minutes to do. And she loved it. They love it. And you work with them to develop the taste. So you just ask them. With my 3 granddaughters, I'll say, okay, what do you want to put in yours today? And so I make a mix of what one wanted raspberries. So I got some frozen raspberries out. One wanted almonds. One wanted that. And what they don't see is I put in a little bit of linseed, some K-fiber, and maybe a little bit of probiotic and anything else I can hide in there. Just a little bit. Because your gut microbiome only needs a little bit to thrive. One single linseed ground up will feed 100 million microbes for the next 24 hours. You understand how important a little bit can be. So it's keeping that diversity of foods. As we get over 1 year of age, we want that diversity of foods to grow, and that creates the diversity of the microbiome. It's the food as we get older is more important than the probiotics. In infanthood, the probiotics have a much bigger role because of that fertile ground that they're starting to grow in. Melatonin. Melatonin isn't just a sleep neurotransmitter. By the way, it has a huge number of anti-cancer effects. You'll see if you've looked at my program on reflux, I talk extensively about melatonin being beneficial in adult reflux. Now, for infants, how do they get it? Well, the mother can supplement with melatonin, and it may help the mother relax a little bit. The same with serotonin, but hard to get as a supplement. But the melatonin, absolutely beneficial for sleep and the gut. So in the treatments, as I said, for reflux, it's also found to benefit inflammatory bowel disease and SIBO, a whole raft of all the gut illnesses out there, because it's a neurotransmitter. It helps set up that nervous system connection. Remember that little triangle with the nervous system there? Yeah, and it also communicates with your immune system and other things. So melatonin is so important and so cheap and so effective. And so with the melatonin, but what the mother eats, the baby will get, and so it's a benefit there. And then you might find that the baby starts just sleeping and being a little bit calmer, as well as helping their neurotransmitters in their gut, their own gut as well, because you're producing more of them. So then it goes, other thing, by the way, sources of melatonin, pistachio nuts, mums. Pistachio nuts are the single biggest nutritional source of what's called phytomelatonin, plant-based melatonin. And it's huge by comparison to anything. So I'm always feeding pistachio nuts to my kids, as my grandkids as well. Then as kids, you've got to look at your gut doesn't just work on fiber and probiotics. It also needs all of the vitamins and minerals as well. So supplementing with vitamins and minerals is fantastic. Antioxidants and anti-inflammatory agents, I can't speak enough about. Please have a look at my presentation on a supplement a day keeps the doctor away. It applies for kids as it does for adults. And the problem is, don't wait till the kids get the illness, work on them now. So there are lots of antioxidants in there. Do we need them? Yes, because every processed food has lost all of these. They haven't just lost the vitamins, they've lost the antioxidants, the anti-inflammatory agents. I'm a big fan of green tea. I drink a lot of green tea. I teach my grandkids to have lots of tea and so on along the way. They love it. And we supplement, the main one we supplement as an anti-inflammatory is K-fiber, because it's anti-inflammatory as well, Metabuzz, which is anti-inflammatory, and a green mix out there to help. So Metabuzz is a fantastic turmeric cocktail. You can look at our website and there's links to it. And then also omega-3s. And omega-3s, the research on omega-3s, now you're thinking, what's this got to do with the gut and colic? Well, first of all, mums, if you're having it, the baby's getting it. And what we do know is omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. They have antioxidant properties, and they help with a lot of metabolic function around the body. So they have a huge role. And the research shows, in general, people need to supplement, adults need to supplement with 2 or more grams a day. So that's one of those little capsules, about that big or something, that you can supplement with. You go for the wild fed or the wild ones, not the farm fed ones. You also go for, if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, you can go for the plant-based one. But what happens with the plant-based ones is your gut needs to acclimatize over a longer period of time to them. So it takes longer to have an effect. So the first, some of the linseed oil or the linseed that you're having is going to benefit a little, but over months and months, it'll get more and more and more. So omega-3s are potent antioxidants. And again, these are the same things I recommend in all that they come out extensively in the reflux research and the IBS research and so on, because they're anti-inflammatory and your gut uses all these nutrients. So your gut will actually use the omega-3 fatty acids. And as a result, you'll have less inflammation where you've got more of these omega-3s. Get the idea? As kids and adults, without any doubt, you need to supplement. And then there are lifestyle factors. And while I don't need to go into these, but a healthy lifestyle plays a big role in gut health of the adults as well as the infants and the kids. And as I highlighted in the beginning, the closeness, the proximity of the mother to the breast and the breast milk plays a big role in what they develop, what they get. They get the skin microbiome on their skin. We've got a skin microbiome. They pick up the skin. They pick up the respiratory microbiome from the mother's breath and the mother's closeness and the skin and so on. So it's a win-win. Why mum has to look healthy, so does the infant along the way. So we've got anything that calms you down as a mother and as an adult, as a parent, also calms the baby down. Teaches the baby calming effects. I do a lot of meditation. My grandkids will sometimes sit with me and meditate. They only meditate for a minute or two, but they're getting the idea about it. There's also very, very important research on the social lives of mothers who are pregnant as well. And the more support that they've got, in other words, the less stress that they've got, the less colic the baby has and the less complications and dysbiosis they have too. So around all these things, remember that the social, the psychological, the emotional environment that we surround in has an impact on our gut and on the health of infants and babies around us, why we need to do it. Now, by the way, I should have mentioned exercise, not obviously for infants, but for toddlers and for adults and pregnant mums. Mums, if you're exercising, those positive exercising chemicals, not too much exercise, please, but those positive exercising chemicals are going through in the blood, getting through into the breast milk and going onto the baby. So it's a win-win situation. So always keep that activity going. What you do gets through. Chiropractic and osteopathy, there are a huge number of myths out there. When I hear the medical profession has put up, oh, be careful, osteopaths and chiropractors, they cause all these problems out there. All you've got to do is look at the facts and the figures. Medicine has its place. There is a role for it. When it comes to chronic illness, it doesn't work for the vast majority of situations. Emergency medicine is fantastic. But when it comes to infants and so on, chiropractic has been shown repeatedly, osteopathy has been shown repeatedly, as has massage, by the way, and reflexology to benefit them. And they've done what are called double-blind placebo-controlled studies. So they go in and they give them one thing over here and they give them the chiropractic here or the osteopathy, and they've seen lots of benefits in there. So the research is available. Now, from a personal experience, I can tell you granddaughter 3, who obviously the youngest, granddaughter 3 had some problems, discomfort, and probably the beginning of colic and so on. And we took her to a chiropractic clinic, and the chiropractor there specifically worked with infants, although many of them will, and literally within 2 treatments, it had all been resolved. Now, why did the baby need chiropractic? Maybe because of the birthing process, maybe because of the stress of the mother, maybe because of lots of issues out there can impact the physiology as well. So the message here is really simple. It does work. And as you can see there, the number needed to treat in that first experiment or the first study that I've got up there was 3. So they had to treat 3 to have 1 benefit, outright benefit. Now, that doesn't mean it's not going to work for everyone, but 1 really discernible benefit. When they did 5 studies and they measured daily hours of crying, they saw that it reduced the crying time. So chiropractic reduced the crying time by 1 hour and 12 minutes per day. So that's significant if you've got a very disrupted baby. So that was infants. Then they've got ones on toddlers there, the studies on toddlers. They were twice as likely not to experience long-term health effects, gut health effects. So it's a win-win situation. So it's not just perhaps fixing up the infant there, but also preventing problems later on, and the toddler there, but preventing issues much later on in life, 4 or 5 years, even further on. And I can tell you right now, it's pretty obvious that your nervous system, remember how important the nervous system is? Your nervous system runs through your spine. Your spine will determine how healthy the messages are that get through to every part of your body, including your digestive system. And I know if I put a certain, I think it's thoracic C6-7 out in my back, then I find digestion a little bit harder. So I need to stretch and sometimes go see my osteopath and chiropractor. It happens for me as an adult. Adults can benefit from it, but so can infants and so can toddlers. And the studies show you just there. So how do we make sure we've got a healthy microbiome? The first one is, as adults, and this applies to infants too, because again, it goes through the food. Water, lots of tea. And a lot of people say, but can I drink coffee? Well, coffee is pretty good. Believe it or not, coffee is pretty good. And you'll see the presentation I've got on the 21 benefits of coffee. There's a little bit of debate about it during pregnancy, and there's a little bit of debate about it during breastfeeding and lactation. So my message is reduce your coffee consumption during those periods. And that means you can, however, also increase your green tea and tea, but reduce your milk. Remember, get rid of your milk if you can. So I have a lot of green tea. I have some water. First thing in the morning is usually some water, then some green tea. Then I'll have some water, then I'll have a cup of tea and a herbal drink later on at night. That's something I do on a regular basis. And it'd be great to get you and your family in that habit. Herbs and spices sprinkled on everything. Those herbs and spices, like I mentioned earlier, the turmeric, that's 2,000 times more potent than some of your other antioxidant, anti-inflammatory protein products out there. Vegetables, nuts and seeds, without any doubt, has to be. And if you can make them more easily digested, e.g. in my smoothies, they're all ground up. So already the enzymes in them are being released, all the nutrients have been released, and I put them in with fruit, and fruit generally has a little bit more enzymes, a little bit higher level of enzymes that help digest it. So it's already starting to pre-digest it. And then I make sure I've got added fiber. In my case, the K fiber, the polyphenols, which are the nutrients, the antioxidants, anti-inflammatories that we get, vitamins and minerals, fermented foods. Now, I haven't talked on that much, but you've got the idea that all of the fermented foods for definitely 3 years and up, maybe 2 to 3, but limit it, regulate it, watch it. And also absolutely for adults, the research on fermented foods is beneficial. I do a lot of my own fermentation. My wife also, Martine, does fermentation. So we have some kimchi, and I do the kombucha, and so we have a different cocktail of these fermented foods. Don't stick to the same one, the same brand, the same thing every time. So we get a mix because it's constantly feeding those bacteria and good viruses and good mold into our gut. And then finally, as adults, probiotics. And as infants, remember, probiotics can have a bigger impact than any of the commercial foods out there. So probiotics can be more beneficial in infanthood. And this is a simple strategy for everyone to start doing it. We've got lots of other information out there in our books, The Deal for Happier, Healthier, Smarter Kids, My Dog Eats Better Than Your Kids. The Deal, I've already got a presentation up there, a 1 hour about looking for what kids need to do on the bigger picture. So from 3 years up, 2 years up, what they can do, what mums can do, and the program. And that My Dog Eats Better Than Your Kids is actually a book we designed for kids and men. We designed it for kids and men because it's got pictures in it, so they can understand what's going on, because kids may not be able to read it yet, but they got the pictures, and men just don't want to read it because it's about health. That's our smoothie maker. They're available online. There's our smoothies. This is a fairly typical smoothie that I do. You're able to, with this one, you're able to make almond milk straight away, fresh almond milk that doesn't have emulsifiers and preservatives in it. And we're able to make, and hasn't been pasteurized and homogenized. So we make a lot of our things fresh in the Ladyship. That's available online. And they are, the red one on the left is what we call our blood pressure smoothie. If you look at our blood pressure presentation, you'll find that, but you'll see lots of recipes up on our site and the basic formula of how to make these smoothies. And kids love them. Work with the kids to find out what you want to put in them. As I said, remember, I put chocolate in this morning, raw cacao, which is potent antioxidants. It's got lots of antioxidants, anti-inflammatory. And then I put in some other things that I hid in there. The great thing about smoothies, you can hide just about everything. So we've got our water filter also that reduces fluoride by 99.9%. It's the only one that I know that does. It's very cost effective and easy. And every family member of ours have both of those machines, the Ladyship and the water filter. It takes out all of the other toxins, as in 99% of the other toxins as well, the heavy metals, the chlorine, and so on. Fluoride's the hardest to take out. And I'm dead against fluoride being put in our water, but if it is, take it out to drink it. And then K fiber, absolutely great, absolutely wondrous food, because it's K fiber is actually sugar cane with the sugar taken out. So sugar cane is a healthy food, and you take sugar out, which is the toxic part of it, and you're left with this superfood behind there. And it's absolutely great. It's great FODMAP, low GI. It's got lots of minerals in there, lots of things called polycosanols, lots of antioxidants, lots of anti-inflammatory agents. And it's got the equivalent of having some veggies in there, veggies and fruit. What a great way to simply hide things in there. And you can, because it doesn't form a glug, you can hide it in there. Now, we've got lots of other programs up there. Please have a look at them, because there is so much more information that I've got on gut that you can get out of the other ones. For example, Gut Secrets and Solutions, Gut Dysbiosis 1 and 2, and Reflux. And they apply to kids and infants as well. So if you can understand that, then you can modify it to fit into that program. I've given you a huge start on kids' gut health here at the moment. We've got all these other ones on weight loss. And by the way, the weight loss program, it's the best one you'll ever find, for the very simple reason that I talk about gut microbiome. So we've got a presentation on that. I talk about toxins. We've got a presentation on that. There is so much detail on these, which is why everybody needs to go through these, look at them, take your notes, and learn more and share more. Now, if you've got a lot of information out of this today, which I have no doubt you will, and you won't get this anywhere else, this is how I've put everything together over the last 30 years of my research. if you have got some information, please share our membership program with people and tell them about it, and share the detail and information. And if you have any questions, email me. Email me. Tell me you're a member of our membership, and I'll see if I can start you on the right track. A very simple strategy. Look after yourselves, guys, and I look forward to you seeing many more of the other programs.